because of the teacher strike, there were no extra days to give. Students have to attend every single day that's possible between now and the end of the school year. So students reported to school on time, and then schools were dismissed will be dismissed at 11:30 this morning, so the students might attend a memorial service if they choose. All Chicago Park District offices are closed, including the main office, although some ancillary field houses may have a small staff. Chicago Public Library, that's all branches closed. All offices of the Chicago Housing Authority are closed today. All city colleges are closed, all 8 of the city colleges. And in addition to all of that, CTA transportation will stop this morning at 10 for 1 minute. And in addition to that, church bells throughout the city will ring this morning at 10 o'clock for about 1 minute as we mark the moment the funeral service begins for the mayor.
There is a certain level of disbelief still that Harold Washington, who was a vibrant politician and a lively man, in fact, could be gone from us. To give you some sense of the chronology of events and how they evolved, we start with Wednesday, the day that began as business as usual for the mayor.
1, 2, 2. We know what to do. There we go.
He's in critical condition, and it appears to be an apparent heart attack, and we have full teams working on him, and at this point we have no further information.
He is still alive?
Yes.
It's my sad responsibility to let you know that Mayor Washington was pronounced dead this afternoon at 1:36.
Oh Lord, I ask that you will continue to smile upon the city of Chicago as we undergo this period of crisis. Bless those who are now considering what it is that they would have to do to keep the city operating.
I think it's real clear the interim mayor is a position that legally, as in signs documents, is actually mayor until the city council meets and selects what we will call the acting mayor.
We basically are doing the things that we know that we have to do, and we're very confident that we will do them well.
This is a very sad day for my family and me, one of the saddest moments of my life. Harold Washington has been the glue of a new coalition. It's inspired the entire nation to a new level of politics.
We pray that we can all come together for the sake of not only Mayor Washington, but we can come together realizing that in unity there is strength. That we can come together recognizing that the city of Chicago can in fact, will in fact, and must in fact be one city made up of one people, always moving forward, always revering the vision, always respecting the legacy, and always knowing that as we move, though he might not be with us in person, that the spirit, the love, the life, and the legacy of Harold Washington will always be present in these chambers. We pray for strength, Almighty God, in thy Son Jesus' name, and for his sake, amen.
Like a great man, like a the memory of Harold Washington and the legacy that he's left behind be the pulsing in our spirits to keep us faithful to work for freedom and justice and for righteousness until the eventual day when peace will be the theme of every heart and love will be the law of every nation.
Funeral services will be held Monday, November 30th at Christ Universal Church at 11901 South Ashland Avenue at 10 a.m.
There certainly are questions about matters of succession. As interim mayor, with the powers and duties of mayor, I will serve until the city council selects, by a majority vote of at least 26 aldermen, an acting mayor from among the 50 aldermen.
It's not a rallying cry at all. It's the truth.
I've been approached by some members of the city council who have said, hey, I could support you.
I think it's a very fluid situation, and I think to say anything less would be less than candid.
If I can cheer somebody with a word or a song, if I can show somebody his strength wrong, then my living shall not be in vain.
Our task is to take up the torch that he has handed to us and dare to bring this city together, to bring it to a point where, in every sense of the word, those things he set about to do
Well, I think when you see the tremendous numbers of people out here who are mourning, that's a big enough answer for you. Mayor Washington was loved. He was loved by the people of Chicago, and they're here to pay their respects, and so am I.
I'm delighted that the leaders met me at the airport today, showing a measure of trust in me, respect for my leadership.
Harold Washington, and we thank God for giving us a vision in the person of Jesse Jackson.
Thank you, Reverend Barrett, Reverend Jackson, and all. Amen. And Jesse Jackson is a child of God and a peacemaker. Thank you very much. Thank you.
resent the fact that somebody who is not a member of the city council would presume to dictate to the city council who the next mayor is going to be. I don't think that the people of Chicago should have their next mayor picked at O'Hare Field or at Operation Push.
Oh, sorry, what do you plan to say to these folks here? Talk to me.
I'm walking up there. All right, come on, Bob. We'll walk. What the hell? I'm going to stop. All right, come on.
An amazing chronology of days. Joining us to help us through this day, Clarence Page, who has been with us many times before during our election coverage. He's a Chicago Tribune columnist and a distinguished commentator. We were talking before, during some of that tape. You first knew Harold Washington when?
Back in the 70s when he first ran for mayor, and when he had the effrontery to confront the political machine at that time and did battle to keep his Senate seat, the state Senate seat, against James Bulljive Taylor, as you may recall. And back at that time, just covering him in that battle in the trenches and all, I remember saying to myself, you know, this guy wouldn't make a bad mayor, but too bad it'll never happen, you know, against the political machine and the tremendous, formidable path he would have to travel. And of course, I've watched him travel that path back when I was covering meetings of the committee to elect a black mayor, the committee that drafted Harold Washington. I thought then, well, this is a really quixotic crusade, but an interesting story. But it just grew, and next thing you know, there he is. I was there on primary night in 1983, and I saw those numbers come rolling in. I said, son of a gun, he might just win this thing. And he did. So it's been a long journey up. And in the last few days, just in talking to people who also traveled that journey, there's a sense that, gee, is it all going to crumble now? Do we have to start all over again? And there is a sense in that Harold Washington coalition that they will.
Well, there is that gritty blend of the sorrow and the mourning for the death of a leader, plus the giant guerrilla warfare that's going on behind the scenes to find his successor. I mean, it's classic Chicago infighting.
That's right. And you can see, I suppose Jesse Jackson with his alliteration might say that on the one hand, you can see their respect and their reverence. You can see it now. We're down there at Christ Universal Temple. On the other hand, there's a subtext to this scene of a recognition of reality. There has been wheeling and dealing going on all weekend, and there is a sense that we want to respect the mayor's memory, but at the same time must recognize those people who are part of his coalition, that they've got to fight to keep that together.
And it's not just in Chicago that this infighting is important. Harold Washington was really a symbol to black leadership around America. He got money from other states and other cities, and the black political loop in America really isn't all that big. Evidence the fact we were here last week when it appeared that Mayor Tom Bradley's office in Los Angeles knew before we did that Harold Washington had died. It was important around the country not only to know about Harold's health, but it's now important to know about his succession.
That's right, and that's why you see so many members of the Congressional Black Caucus here today also to pay their respects. It is a rather small loop, and there was a sense that Harold Washington's election victory was a new step in black political empowerment here in the United States. 20 years ago, when the first black mayors were elected, that alone was enough just to get black people in those positions. When Harold Washington won his victory, it was the defeat of a well-entrenched political machine and also a victory for reform-minded politics.
Well, and it was a reminder that there was a victory in Chicago, that Harold Washington had won a victory in Chicago, where it can be argued Dr. Martin Luther King had not.
That's right. Chicago has a great deal of symbolism for that reason.
But we talk about a black mayor. There is now great dispute over what kind of black mayor between Timothy Evans and Eugene Sawyer. It's not just the function of being a black mayor anymore, but to whom you have the greatest loyalty. And the fight over Evans and Sawyer seems to be, again, between the old machine and the new organization of Harold Washington, right?
Before we discuss that, let's take a quick look back at the church. Paul Hogan is there live. Paul?
Ron and Carol, we are here with Ramon Price, the mayor's brother. First of all, our condolences to you, Mr. Price. So we understand your loss, and You know, Mayor Washington was a private man when it came to his family. I wonder if you could share with us his association with his family.
Hold it.
How he felt. Hold it.
With our picture,
Okay,
we can hear Dick Kay and Mayor Washington's
Thank
brother there.
you.
We can see you again now.
Okay, we are with Mr. Price, and I wonder if you can share with us some of those private moments now.
Well, I'm not sure that I can come up with anything astounding. It was that sort of loving thing. He was particularly fond of the younger people in the family. He loved his sisters. You know, they all, around the girls, he became quite a different person. I wish that you could have seen that.
Well, he loved kids, period. I've noticed.
Right. In fact, I can remember not too long ago when I was in the office there, and we had spoken about something, and then I understood that he had an appointment, and he took out his pick and he started preening his hair, and it kind of threw me off. And as I turned around, there was this group of kids coming in, you know, and he was actually preening for them, you know, something that he'd never do for you.
Well, I wish we could have seen some of that. That's the private side of Mayor Washington that we never really saw.
Well, I think that's the most frustrating part because he was getting to the part, we were getting to that point where you could see more of that. You know what the struggle was like. You know how every moment was theirs. So we lost him for almost 3 years. And with his re-election, we were moving towards a more, normal, if you will, lifestyle, because he wasn't a hermit. He was far from it. He liked to read, but he loved people. We tried to maintain a weekly session, he and I, and they were great.
Now, have you seen this enormous crowd that is ringing this church, most of whom will not get in? You heard what happened over the weekend.
That is what has helped to sustain us. I'm looking forward to getting by myself and having a good cry, but it hasn't happened. It can't happen yet because there's something extremely dynamic and historic, and I feel like I just hope that we can hold on to it, because I'm a Chicagoan. Our parents were from Southern Illinois, and we've always known Chicago. Chicago is ours. And so it hurts me to hear people say that we're the most segregated city. And I hope that we can use this to try to come together. We're very close. We're very close.
It may be part of his legacy, in fact, probably a major part of his legacy, that Chicago is no longer as racially divided to the degree that it was before he was elected.
Yeah, I think so. I think that we definitely have moved. I visited the City Hall last night. We closed up at 12 o'clock. And to see those people who realized that it was too late, it was raining, but to see them linger and try to hold on, to stand in the rain to watch the remains being brought out, I think it was more than sightseeing. I think that it was something very real that was happening, and I'm losing my voice.
It must be a deep sense of pride and grief at the same time.
Yeah, it is. It is. I was telling someone else that I think it was Thursday that I was awakened with a phone call, and the phone call was from President Jimmy Carter. And as we talked, I told him that we too were sending out condolences because the loss was one to the city. And he said, no, Ramon, it was to the country. And that really said something.
Right.
I think that
You and your brother and the rest of the family have conducted yourself with such dignity through this, and also you have allowed the city and the people of this city to share in your grief by allowing this, what happened over the weekend at City Hall. That was a difficult decision for you all, I know.
It was.
But you did it because really Harold Washington is bigger than just your brother or someone else's uncle. He belonged to all of us.
Right. No, early on, I had to operate pretty much alone because the family was still up. And it was difficult because I said, we're not doing a circus. You know, I didn't want to create a media event. And so we thought about it, and I realized that we just had to do it. We had to be sure that everyone that we possibly could accommodate could get in and do that private thing.
Well, on behalf of all of us in the media, we thank you very much for sharing it and for permitting us that these last moments, and we will not detain you any longer, Ramon Price.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and our condolences. And that's Ramon Price, Mayor Washington's brother.
A very gracious man who also was one of the two family members who was able to come across from City Hall to Daley Plaza on Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock for those hastily organized memorial services that were held there to several thousand grateful people who wanted some opportunity to express some moment with the mayor.
It's got to be a real conflict, what Mr. Price was saying, between turning something into a media circus when it is a deeply private, grieving family affair, and decide that you're going to let the cameras and the people in. We were all talking before this broadcast. At 3 o'clock on Sunday morning, I decided to go downtown because I thought this was a perfect time and it would be quiet, and I was shocked to find tens of thousands. I can't count crowds, but
That's right.
but so many people at 3 a.m. when it was cold and it had begun to rain, and the lines were all the way around Daley Plaza.
And look at the decision the family made. The family's personal choice, the one that is being carried out in this funeral service that you will see, is for a closed casket. That's apparently the way this family felt about their own grieving. But they made the decision, as Mr. Price indicated, that it was important for this city that as many people as possible be allowed to have their moment with their mayor. So it seems to have been a decision that might have even run contrary to their personal beliefs or wishes, but one that was clearly important to the city when hundreds of thousands of people came out to take that moment.
I think this is sort of symbolic itself of a contradiction of Mayor Washington that puzzled and bemused us for so long. He was a very public man and a very private man. He kept his private life private as he could, remarkably so for a man of his stature. At the same time, I'm sure his family realizes how much he means to so many people in Chicago and elsewhere. You're right. People were parading through City Hall to see the mayor lying in state throughout the night over the weekend. And this in itself, I think what is also remarkable is that it was not more of a circus. Everyone showed such respect. Everyone came through with such reverence and stood for so long in the weather and didn't make any noise.
Everyone's got a number of stories. There was a woman ahead of me in line who had to go to work at the University of Illinois Chicago Circle at 5:30 in the morning. It was 3 in the morning. She apparently had some diabetic condition, was getting weak. A lady next to her got the paramedics to give her something to eat, but she stayed there because she was determined that she would pay her last respects before she went to work.
I was also touched by, when you heard Mr. Price speaking, Harold Washington was mayor for 4 years and about 7 months, I guess.
Right.
You heard his brother say about the job, he was gone for 3 years, gone from us, the family he meant. And you stop to think about what Harold Washington did as mayor, almost never took a vacation. We learned from Alton Miller's interviews, his press secretary's interviews over the weekend, that on weekends he often met with political leaders, people from City Hall, to discuss strategy and just to talk about what was going on in the city. So his private life, to a greater or lesser degree, was his public life, it seems, at least during the years he was mayor. He was completely dedicated.
But Clarence, is that different than how he was when he was a state senator or in the House? I mean, wasn't he always reputed to be someone who read voraciously, met with people? His idea of recreation was talking and dealing with political realities, not going to the Bahamas.
That's right. In many ways, he was a stereotypical Hyde Park resident. He was an intellectual. He had a strong intellectual style. I remember him saying, I am an omnivorous Catholic reader, meaning he just ate up everything. He wanted to read everything from the existential philosophers to detective novels, and he did. And yet, at the same time, he didn't want to be interviewed about what books he read. He didn't want to give people the idea that he was one of these highbrow intellectual types. And he always worked.
The other contradiction was those people who knew him said his personal life was often disorganized, often in a state of disarray. He apparently did not return letters promptly, telephone calls promptly. We know he had some legal problems because of that disarray. He didn't, when he was a lawyer, he did not perform some duties for some clients that he said he would, and actually lost his law license for a year. And the tax charge was not that he didn't pay taxes. He did pay taxes.
That's right.
But that he never filed the returns for 4 years. Part of that disarray, apparently.
Remember the news clips that described him when he was running for mayor as having an apartment littered with books and heavily disorganized? I remember interviewing him once a couple of years later in his newer Hyde Park apartment. I said, Mayor, what about this business that your place is a mess, that you're covered in books? He said, please look around, Miss Marine. Do you see
disarray?
Do you see disarray?
Right, right. Well, I remember stories of how his aides, I can't say handlers, with some people you can say handlers, he never had handlers, he handled himself, but his aides trying to dress him up because he was not a fellow who cared about fashion, and it was terrible for campaigning, wearing wide lapels when narrow lapels are in fashion, and wearing old polka dot and mod ties, and there were just many stories like that. But he was a man who worked full-time, and I think what's really remarkable is he had to be talked into running for mayor. He thought that, too, was a quixotic mission. He could have been a congressperson and had all the prominence and not have worked nearly as hard. But he decided to run for mayor, and he was a very hard
There's the governor arriving at Christ Universal Temple, and just about on time. All of this so far this morning is happening just about on schedule. The governor's schedule called for him to arrive at 9:40 this morning, so he's 2 or 3 minutes early, actually. And you could see the aldermanic area inside one of the special VIP seating areas. It looked like it was pretty full at this moment. Governor and Jane Thompson going into the church now. And we have 2 different schedules for the order of service now, but the governor is listed as on one of those schedules as one of those who will be providing one of the tributes to the mayor as part of the official service when it gets underway at just about 10 o'clock.
There are literally dozens of mayors from other cities here to pay their respects. Andrew Young of Atlanta among them. There are presidential candidates, Joseph Biden, Albert Gore, Michael Dukakis, Paul Simon, Jesse Jackson. There are movie stars like Lou Gossett Jr., religious leaders, the Reverend Louis Farrakhan. There is a massive collection of very diverse people who come to honor Harold Washington. This is the stage of the altar of Christ Universal Church. It is the church of the Reverend Johnny Coleman. Clarence, you were saying, and I found this interesting, Reverend Coleman does not like funerals, does she?
That's right. When she opened this temple, and this was quite a moment in local Chicago black religious history, it is the biggest on the South Side, and it was a major project, and she said she wasn't going to have funerals in this church because this church was to celebrate life. But in this case, she made an exception, and a very significant one for obvious reasons.
Well, she was specific. No dead bodies
That's
inside
right.
Christ Universal Temple, right?
That's right. That was her view, and I think she still holds true to that view. But at the same time, this, in many ways, is viewed by many people as a celebration of Harold Washington's life. So she is easily able to justify it on that basis.
And it is impossible to be a campaigner, an effective campaigner in the black community in Chicago without campaigning in black churches.
That's right. Well, the church has always been important, not just in Chicago, but throughout black history. You know, even in slavery times, going off to a religious observance was one occasion to get away from the masters. And throughout the civil rights history, of course, Dr. King and so many other church leaders really were the point men and point women for the civil rights movement. And that is still so true today. It is one time on 11 o'clock on Sunday morning. That's one time that you can reach the bulk of the black communities, they say, the real movers and shakers.
What you're seeing now are the mayor's cabinet members arriving. Rob Muir, who's head of the Department of Economic Development. A moment ago, I believe we saw Brenda Gaines. Some question, as there necessarily will be in this line of succession with Mayor Washington, about those who will remain and those who will leave. And there's been considerable discussion of that already.
The mayor's press spokesman, Al Miller, has already announced that he is resigning effective at the end of the year. The mayor's chief of staff, Ernest Bearfield has said he will stay on if he's wanted. Unlike presidential politics, there are some things unclear about this transitional government that will take effect in the city of Chicago. There would be a custom at the national level to submit resignations and allow the incoming person to choose whomever they would like to remain in cabinet-level positions. But it is different in this case in that the stated goal here so far is that there be an orderly transition, and that one of the commitments, almost in a campaign way, being made by those who would like to be mayor now is that they will continue what Mayor Washington started, and one would presume from that that would include some of his key people and key posts.
That's right. In times like this, you discover how large and how complex city government really is. I think it would certainly be foolish of any new interim mayor to change too many seats right away. It would be very important to maintain an easier transition, particularly now when the budget-making process.
I was about to say, you have a 1988 budget with a record tax increase.
That's right.
That is going to have to in some way be defended and or dealt with promises of new and greater assaults now that this coalition of the mayors at least appears to be on moderately shifting ground.
And we've got 30 days to enact it. It's got to be enacted by the end of the year. While we are looking at some of the other dignitaries, politicians, entertainers, and well-known Chicagoans who are entering Christ Universal Temple now for the mayor's funeral services, let us also remember that one of Mayor Harold Washington's great commitment was to, if you will, the ordinary people of Chicago. And Channel 5's Renee Ferguson right now is with a group of people I guess we could describe as those to whom Mayor Washington was committed. Renee?
Well, Ron, many people are mourning the mayor's passing today in various ways, and I'm with the Talmadge Guy family. He and his wife and friends have decided that they are going to spend this day mourning at home with family and friends. As you notice, there are a number of little children here, and they are going to have to remember Harold Washington through what their parents tell them. Talmadge, tell me, what do you think you're going to tell your daughter? What do you want your daughter to remember about this day?
Well, she won't remember it, of course, but
what are you going to tell her?
I'd like her to have a sense of who Harold Washington was, and what he meant, what he stood for, the principles that he believed in, the struggle that he represented, and what he embodied, and to have that be a part of her legacy as a resident of this city, as a developing black woman.
Are you confident now that without the mayor, that this will still be a good city for her to grow up in?
Oh, I think Chicago will be a fine city. I think there are a lot of challenges that face us. As I said, I think what the mayor stood for, the principles and the things that he believed in, those are things that will, of course, have to be carried forward by a new leadership. But I'm confident that the progress that the mayor made during his tenure as mayor will be continued.
What about you, Jackie? What are you going to tell about this day?
The feelings that we're having this day, what Harold Washington meant to us as a family, as residents of Chicago, the beginning that he has placed for her. Maybe one day she'll want it. And because he was established and he was mayor, that makes it even, the chance is even greater.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot. Ron and Carol, I think that pretty much sums it up for one family and their friends who live on the South Side and who decided that they would spend this day inside watching what goes on TV.
Yeah, and I think we want to make a correction, Renee. Originally, Renee was going to try to be at Robert Taylor Homes this morning, but she changed locations and is with a family at 86th and Honoree, which is a long way from the Robert Taylor home, so we appreciate these folks letting us into our home, into their home to spend a moment with them.
You've just seen in the last few minutes a number of people arrive. U.S. Senator Paul Simon of Illinois.
New York Mayor Ed Koch arrived.
this
Number
time
of mayors:
Central
Wilson
City.
Good of Philadelphia.
Congressman Charlie Hayes with acting mayor, well, interim mayor. Actually, when I met him Friday, I just said mayor. Mayor David Orr. He is, in fact, the mayor of Chicago. He signs the papers. He is, as part of the orderly succession, he was the vice mayor, and he became mayor until the council, in short order, or soon, however the statute reads, elects one of its own.
The astonishing thing is that in these 4 years, we could have as many as 5 mayors. Harold Washington, David Orr as vice mayor, elect an interim mayor from the members of the city council. In 2 years, or in less than 2 years, have a special election until the 1991 election, which would potentially yield the 5th mayor.
And that in
4
itself
years.
shows, again, the importance of a smooth, orderly transition, as we were saying earlier. See some
More dignitaries.
Andrew Young
Andrew
of
Young.
Atlanta.
There's Mayor Jackson.
Yeah.
And there's the King
Dick
family.
Gregory.
And Mayor Marion Barry of Washington, D.C. as well, with Dick Gregory.
Jane Byrne, we're told, is arriving. The crowd that you see coming in, the crowd that's already assembled, again speaks to the fact that Harold Washington did not just belong to us. Harold Washington belonged to the nation. He's a national political leader.
There's Jane Byrne in the light coat and dark hat.
He was a force at the last convention. He was expected to be a larger force at this convention.
I think the presence of the Atlanta contingent there shows you his importance in civil rights history as well. He was an active participant in the civil rights movement, and the movement in turn supported his political goals.
And that one caused some political concern in Chicago as well. There were charges that the mayor was routinely giving away contracts to the city of Atlanta and Atlanta-connected people in return for that support.
That's right. That included people like Ernest Bearfield, who was a native Chicagoan, and said he went to Atlanta because that city would hire him when this city would not. And in many ways, Atlanta was a training ground for many black political, I should say black governmental infrastructure people like Ernest Bearfield, who knew how government operates and use that experience here in Chicago.
And Ernest Bearfield, when credit is given to him, it is given for his bureaucratic abilities, not his political abilities.
That's quite right, and that's why I think it's comforting for many people to hear that he's willing to stay on as long as he is needed and wanted. It's especially important at a time when we have to have a new city budget by the end of this year.
At the same time that it may be comforting to some, it's disturbing to others. There's always been the argument among some of the more machine-oriented black aldermen that the mayor's staff was problematic, right? That it stood, that they stood in the way of that aldermanic block. We're told that the Reverend Jesse Jackson is now just arriving. Reverend Jackson was in Kuwait, beginning of his trip to the Persian Gulf, when he received word. There was a phone call shortly after he arrived, and
the Reverend Jesse Jackson has, politically, has got a lot on the line now. When he arrived at O'Hare Airport after coming back from the Middle East, he was met immediately by some leaders who clearly were seeking him out as a mediator of some kind, and he expressed gratitude for that and got involved, apparently, in the succession process to a greater or lesser degree, depending upon whom you listen to now. And there's a question, you could see in some of the videotape we showed you earlier that at the Operation Push meeting on Saturday morning at 9 o'clock, Jesse Jackson clearly reacted to Alderman Tim Evans.
Right.
Stood up, gave him the loudest round of applause, and in fact, Evans got the loudest round of applause of all the potential candidates at Push on Saturday morning. So he appeared to be Jesse Jackson's guy. And now it appears that Evans may not get the job. So there's a question of whether Jesse Jackson loses some political face in all of this.
And there's some debate, is there not, Clarence, about whether, in fact, he took the role of kingmaker or it was foisted upon him. There is an argument that while he was in the Persian Gulf, and there was clear, because we were also there, that he was taking phone calls on a regular basis, he was making phone calls on a regular basis, that his hand was clearly in this succession process.
Right.
from the beginning.
I understand there was some debate over there as whether he would come back immediately or wait a few days, and it was obvious that he had to take more of an active role and came back immediately. There is a debate over whether or not he failed in his assumed role of kingmaker. He was very careful to not publicly endorse Tim Evans. I suspect that over time it's going to be viewed as a case of Jesse trying to help a cause that was probably lost from Friday morning, and I mean Tim Evans' cause, that Sawyer already had the political advantage in the council, although Evans undoubtedly has much more of an advantage in large segments of the black community. In the council, Sawyer had the upper hand, and Jesse may have actually delayed what was virtually inevitable.
You think so? You think
It's possible.
Gene Sawyer was inevitable?
It's quite possible because just from what I heard of Washington administration people on Friday, they were very grim and pessimistic about Tim Evans' chances at that point. So it was, as you recall, everybody went to meet him at the airport because everybody knows that Jesse's blessing is very important if you're going to be a black political leader in Chicago. There's no question about that. Is it essential, though? That's the question. And I think we see now that Jesse Jackson's endorsement is not essential, that apparently some people in the organization confronted him and said, we can fight you back.
Let's check in with Paul Hogan back live just outside the church. Paul?
Yes, Ron, we're standing with two more brothers of the mayor, Roy Washington and Ernest Price, who are just preparing to go inside. First, thank you both for letting us and therefore the city share in this ceremony today, because it's important, isn't it? You know why.
Yeah, it's sad to say of our lives. We've never experienced anything like this, so intense, such speed. It's carried everything for us. We thought that we would pull through this when Harold had his first of Harold's illness, but it was just completely shattered. Devastating.
Mr. Price, I wonder if you share your thoughts.
Well, you know, it's one of those things. It's hard for all of us to take it. You know, I hadn't got over him being mayor good. People now got to get over him not being with us. Yeah. But we all here for a short time, I guess. You know.
We would really like to express our condolences to both of you, and thank you for taking a moment or two to talk with us at least.
Thank you,
This
Mr.
hour of grief for you.
They
We
must,
should,
of course, get inside. We should point out another dignitary has arrived now, and that is Senator Kennedy. Let me see if I can get over there.
While you're doing that, let me tell you that members of the Daley family are here. State's Attorney Richard Daley is here with his brothers, John Daley and William Daley. And many mayors from around the country. Mayor Washington was extremely active in the National Conference of Mayors. And we have seen Wilson Good from Philadelphia. We have seen Coleman Young from Detroit, Mayor Ed Koch from New York, Mayor Riley, I believe, from Kansas City, who was the head of the National Conference of Mayors, members of the Black Congressional Delegation, Bob Gibson, who is the head of the Illinois AFL-CIO. There are so many labor leaders and business leaders
Very
here.
interestingly, Dick, though, did you notice that Reverend Jackson, it is our understanding, came in through the back door? He did not arrive out here in front where we are and where most other dignitaries are arriving, but came through the back door. And that's why he's inside now, and we didn't see him.
Well, and there are so many people arriving, members of the mayor's family still arriving, members of Congress still arriving, senators. This is the mayor's boyhood friend who is arriving now. And there are just so many that I mean, the outpouring, Harold Washington was in fact a national figure, and it is just almost impossible to keep track of all the familiar faces that are going into this church here for the final services
But
for
Dick,
Mayor Harold Washington.
there are going to be some unfamiliar faces now going into the church because they're preparing to let the first of the general public go in. And our understanding from people who are inside is that there aren't that many seats available in there.
As we said, Senator Ted Kennedy just arrived just a short time ago. As you know, Senator Kennedy came to Chicago and campaigned with Mayor Washington. Who could ever forget the Mexican song?
Oh yeah,
And the
they-
Mexican hat. I
Well,
mean,
Harold put a sombrero on, and Kennedy sang the song in Spanish, off key as well. You remember that, Carol?
but loudly and happily. And
Well, there have been several of those over the past few years. We can remember Senator Kennedy and Harold Washington and Jane Byrne. Over the past 3 or 4 years, singing in public has become quite popular in Chicago. They were supposed to reserve inside the Christ Universal Temple the balcony area for members of the public, and we were told that seating would be about 1,000 people. But we could also tell from looking inside that seating is difficult even for the best known of dignitaries. They are trying best they can to save seats in designated areas, but we've seen a good deal of shuffling and moving about inside. It's not like there's a ticket with a specific seat number. There are areas set aside for business leaders, for community civic leaders, for judges, for county and state officials, for aldermen, for family members, for boards and commissioners, for cabinets, for national officials, for clergy, for members of the mayor's office and immediate cabinet members, for the media. There are specific roped-off areas, but as I try and look through the crowd as we look at it live inside the church, I can see that not all of the state officials are together, and it doesn't even seem that all of the aldermen are together. So it appears that the demand for seats is so heavy that people are sitting on the main floor wherever they can, and we can presume there's some overflow that's gone into the balcony, and that could cut down on the number of the members of public who could get inside, which would be unfortunate because Harold Washington really did make an effort throughout his life to give access to the public wherever possible. That was one of the great issues in his 1983 inauguration at Navy Pier, was that they have it somewhere where there could be some kind of access by the public. And there will be one similarity between this funeral service and that inaugural event in 1983 at Navy Pier, and that is Aaron Copland's Fanfare to the Common Man. That was selected as one of the pieces to be played during Harold Washington's inauguration, and it will be played here again today at his funeral some 4 years and some months later.
It is a shame, you know, fanfare to a common man, but common man and woman really is going to have to watch this on TV. There isn't a place big enough in Chicago, certainly not a church large enough to accommodate everyone who wants to come to pay their last respects.
There's no place big
Harold
enough in the
Washington.
country with all the hundreds of thousands of people we saw parade through over the weekend. We can see it would take a very large amphitheater indeed.
You were back looking just briefly at the family Renee had been talking with a moment ago at 86th and Honoree, representative of families all throughout Chicago who will, now I think that might have been the balcony in the back area of the church we finally got a quick look at, where there may be some public seating, and you'll see these people still outside, still waiting, still hoping for some opportunity to get near, to get inside, to share some moment if they can. There's the balcony looking down on the main floor at Christ Universal Temple, and the balcony, it would appear, is already reasonably full, so those people who are outside at this point, it would seem, are not going to get inside.
We're told by some of the wire services that the people who stayed outside Christ Universal Temple last night, they began assembling as early as 7 o'clock last night. That, by the way, is Al Raby, well-known civil rights leader going way back to the King days. Worked with Harold Washington, was campaign manager in his first campaign. People stood outside 7 o'clock last night, and to keep warm, they had wool blankets, plastic tablecloths, every possible means by which that they could withstand some of the awful weather that was out there last night, simply for the opportunity to be allowed in the balcony area.
You know, I don't want to make too much of this, but I have now had several people mention to me, have you noticed that except for a brief moment on Saturday afternoon, we've not seen the sun since Harold Washington died?
That's right.
And it was sunny the morning he went out to start on the groundbreaking, and when he got up there was some sunshine, and then it's been gray and somber, as if the weather has matched the mood for many Chicagoans these past several days.
There's a bit of Piquant symbolism there, and I'm sure many will recall on the day of Mayor Daley's funeral, it was uncommonly cold, and it was in late December, and this may be just one more parallel to draw between two of our biggest, greatest modern leaders.
One of the things that we are about to experience in Chicago is the tolling of the bells. In about 15 seconds, bells all around this city will mark the passing of Harold Washington by ringing in the bell towers.
Church bells and all CTA trains and buses will stop. You're looking at Holy Name Cathedral, the bells should begin pealing, and all CTA trains and buses will come to a stop for 1 minute in the city of Chicago.
There was a wonderful editorial cartoon over the weekend that showed Harold Washington in heaven saying, "You want Harold? You've got Harold."
That's right.
You wonder how he would react to the somberness of the city today.
Well, as one of his family members said a moment ago, even amongst his immediate family, I'm not used to him being mayor yet. Now I've got to get used to him not being here at all.
Will be very much missed by many people. There's almost a legendary, a mythical sense with which we attach our idea of what it's like for Mayor Daley up in heaven, and I can only imagine now we're going to be imagining many political discussions between those two great leaders, both debating over how Chicago really ought to be run, and probably having a chuckle now and then over the political Donnybrooks that are bound to take place in the city council.
Wonder if there'd be any coalition politics up there or not.
That's right.
You saw Louis Farrakhan just a moment ago.
If there's any room or need for coalition politics, there would be, I think we can rest assured.
Former Gary Mayor Richard Hatcher, over to the right of the screen.
Congressman Ron Dellums of the Congressional Black Caucus from Berkeley, California.
Farrakhan at the base of the screen, Reverend Louis Farrakhan.
The great have gathered. You are listening to the organ in the background. That's an organ prelude by Fred Nelson, who is the organist for today. And we are about to begin the service, and apparently it will begin very close to on time. The organ prelude has begun on time. The officiant today will be the Reverend Dr. Kenneth Smith, who is president of the Chicago Theological Seminary, United Church of Christ Seminary on the south side of Chicago, in the Hyde Park area.
You will remember that Kenneth Smith also played a prominent role in Chicago politics and the school board.
That's right. And
the Byrne
was a man
administration.
who's been talked of in the past as a possible mayor, as a great blue ribbon candidate.
Very diplomatic, intelligent,
Right.
thoughtful man.
Lines still go around the block outside Christ Universal Temple Church, and these are the people who will not get inside, and we don't know yet if they've been informed that they will not get inside, but I would doubt very much that they are going to go away. This is as close as they are going to get, and I'm sure it will be good enough. We should also tell you that we will try to identify for you visually on the screen as many of the participants in the funeral service as is possible. They will include the mayor's brother, who you already met, Ramon Price, who will give a tribute. The governor will give a tribute. George Dunn, Cook County Board, will give a tribute, and the Reverend Jesse Jackson will give a tribute. There will be various choirs, other tributes from Reverend William Gray, who's in the 1st Congressional District in Pennsylvania, representing the National Black Caucus. Ernest Bearfield, the mayor's chief of staff. There's New York Mayor Ed Koch, you can see. Alderman Tim Evans will give a tribute. Alderman Jesus Garcia. There will be readings from the scripture by Rabbi Charney, who's past president of the Board of Rabbis of Chicago. There will be a reading from the scripture by Joseph Cardinal Bernardine. There will be a prayer by Dr. Sterling Carey, who's from the Council of Religious Leaders of Chicago. And there will be the eulogy by Harold Washington's own pastor, the Reverend B. Herbert Martin.
You're seeing presidential candidate Richard Gephardt there. He's campaigned many times.
Alan Dixon, Senator Alan Dixon, along with Senator Paul Simon.
Congressman Gus Savage to the very far right and base of the screen.
Congressman Gus Savage, who said on this set the other day he owes his education to Harold Washington, that he might not have learned much at all if it hadn't been for the books Harold Washington gave him.
That's right. They go way back to college together, of course, Roosevelt University, where they both ran for office. I believe that was their first time, and they both won.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but they also used to butt heads pretty hard together, didn't they?
I think both of those gentlemen, feisty and opinionated as they are, butted heads many times, but they were also the best of friends.
Let's find out from our reporters just outside the church, political editor Dick Kay and Paul Hogan. What about those people who are still outside? I see some people still filing in. There must be some room left in that balcony.
That's what we're trying to find out. Chuck Kelly was one of Mayor Washington's closest aides. You have just informed the crowd, given them some news. What are you going to do here?
Well, we had about 2,000 seats on the first floor, and there was supposed to be about 1,000 seats for the general public. Obviously, the VIPs brought guests, and we're only going to be able to let approximately 200 to 300 people in, maybe less.
And there are thousands here.
Right, and we're going to have to tell them to go home.
Well, are you going to let some into a back room where there's
What we have here is an area called the Star Garden, if I'm not mistaken, and the services will be amplified in that area. We'll hold about 1,000 people standing up outside.
But most of them you think will probably stay. I mean, it's my guess, judging from the line all the way around the fence. But you're going to move as many in as possible, but you suspect only 200 or 300.
Yes, in the building. The rest of them will either have to leave if they like, or go to the Star Garden and listen to it outside.
Any guess how many are left outside there now, Dick?
Any guess how many are left outside here? Have you talked to the security? Have they told you?
No, only from what I can see, the line starts at 119, goes down Ashland all the way to 120th Street. They're about 6 abreast. It's got to be 4,000 or 5,000 at least.
And only 200 or 300 will get in.
That's right.
An awful lot of disappointed people. You must be surprised, as all of us.
I am. The original planning called for the bulk of the people to be the general public. Obviously, some people got in without tickets, as I said earlier. VIP brought unexpected guests.
Thank you, but those are dignitaries, labor leaders, businessmen. Eddie Einsdorf, or Jerry Reinsdorf, Eddie Einhorn are here, members of the Daley family, Governor Thompson, just about every dignitary in Illinois from outside the country, we are told, from Zimbabwe. An incredible entourage of dignitaries inside.
Well, and we all know how things get done in Chicago, Dick. I mean, it's an awful lot of pressure on an usher at a church in Chicago to say no when a senator or a congressman or a labor leader or a movie star shows up and has a guest without a ticket and says, "This person's with me."
But many of these people were with Harold Washington, and many of them worked in his campaign, worked for him, formed coalitions with him, and he was a national figure and an international figure. Ron, you said it best the other day when you remembered that Mayor Washington used to say, wherever you go, people all over the world will ask you, how's Harold? And it's true.
Boy,
it is
it?
very true,
Isn't
and
it?
most of them are here today.
But it's still kind of a shame that for so many people who have patiently waited and waited for the opportunity to participate in the funeral service, that so few unnamed, non-dignitary type folks get a chance to go in there.
I suspect that many of those people are out there because they want to be a part of history. They want to be a part of this event. They want to show their respect for the late Mayor Washington. And in that way, it's not surprising. And there is certainly an irony. He was a man of the people. People always felt a great deal of accessibility with this mayor. And I think here again, they're coming down there not just as devoted supporters, but as friends.
The flag-draped coffin of Mayor Harold Washington. The mayor was a veteran. There was a flag on his open casket at City Hall as his body was lying in state in the rotunda.
It looks as though they are just about set to begin. Organist Fred Nelson.
Still some people being seated, and there may be a brief delay. As we heard one of the security people say, there's still room for maybe 200 or 300 people to get inside and be allowed up in in the balcony area. And then the good news, if there's a bit of good news, is that they have made provisions for amplification of the services in an outside garden area, though people will have to stand outside. You can see some of the Chicago Mounted Patrol helping organize things just outside the church. So at least 1,000 people will be able to stand outside and hear what is going on inside, but even that will fall far short of certainly the need for the estimated 3,000 to 5,000 people who may be gathered outside now. And there was some confusion about this service from the start. When this service was first announced, it was announced as a private, by invitation only service. And then the next day, apparently after some discussion with the family and with the mayor's staff, it was decided that it would be billed as an open service, but that there would be special VIP seating. And I guess in fairness, we need to say all along, Chicagoans have been warned that it would be very risky trying to go down there to get a seat, that a lot of the seats would be taken by VIPs, and that it would be first come, first served.
There will be an opportunity following the burial of Harold Washington at Oakwood Cemetery, which is at 67th and Cottage Grove. After the burial, there will be another service, a remembrance service, the University of Illinois, Chicago, at the pavilion there at 1150 West Harrison. What you're seeing right now is the Oakwood cemetery, that is, where some distinguished people beyond Harold Washington have been laid to rest. Jesse Owens, Big Bill Thompson, Clarence Darrow, quite an assortment of individuals.
And the mayor will be placed just about in the center of that cemetery.
That's right. It'll be a place of great prominence, I'm sure. I'm reminded here again of, in speaking of the crowds outside, of Mayor Daley's funeral over at a much smaller church in Bridgeport. And I was one of the teeming multitudes outside who could not get in. But even though it was bitter cold, much colder than today, not rainy, but people stayed out there throughout the entire service. And it truly was a circumstance in which I think we all felt like we're part of something here, and this is a final farewell, and it's a part of history.
Mayor Daley lay in state really for only one day, right, Clarence?
As I recall.
At Holy Sepulchre Church.
That's right. But there again, of course, Mayor Daley was viewed as a man of the people, a man who came out of the neighborhoods and who represented the interests of the neighborhoods. And there again, many people came out in a way that was larger than life, showed how Daley himself was a man who was larger than life. And I think we're seeing that again here today with Mayor Harold Washington.
I misspoke. It was the Nativity of Our Lord
Nativity of
Church
Our Lord. I was just
on West 37th
myself.
Street, right? And it was Holy Sepulchre at which he was buried.
And the reason I happened to know that and was able to check the quick reference was, if you want to take a look, Clarence, you'll remember the Chicago Tribune of that day.
Many of us have hung on to that edition of the Chicago Tribune. It was a day that for over 2 decades we all thought it's the day that can never come. This man will live forever. It seemed that way. There were so many people who grew up under Mayor Daley who knew no other mayor but him. And now, ironically, Harold Washington was taken from us at a time when he was just beginning to consolidate his power. We were just starting to see what he could do.
But with such similarities between when word came of Mayor Washington's death, it was like a replay of Daley's in many ways. Massive coronary, gray winter day, no forewarning.
Middle of a work day.
Yes.
Had a public event in the morning.
And right before a holiday.
Middle of the day, right before a holiday. It is, there are very eerie similarities.
Indeed there are.
To say the least. In fact, I think it's what most people thought about first when, wherever they were last week, they heard that initial word that the mayor has been taken ill, the mayor was taken to the hospital, not knowing at all what went on. That was the first thing that struck me was, it's a weekday, it's the middle of the day, don't let it be.
Well, and there was also a kind of news blackout that surrounded both events where you couldn't get information about the condition of the mayor. There was great dread that, in fact, it was a massive coronary and that there was going to be no medical alternative to it.
There were an awful lot of silent prayers being uttered that he was going to be all right, hoping it would be all right. And it was one more shock, a shock that came at a time when no one was prepared for it, of course. And there were the inevitable comparisons to the days when President John Kennedy and Martin Luther King were taken away.
Jane Byrne in the distance there.
The crowd has gathered, the great and the near great, to honor Mayor Harold Washington. Funeral service has now been delayed about 15 minutes, and they're not going to hurry into it. It will be delayed until all those who can be seated are seated, and then it will begin. And we were told originally that the funeral service should stay pretty close to an hour.
Color guard, carry color.
Appears we are about to begin.
The posting of the colors.
There are many honorary pallbearers for the mayor, but the actual pallbearers will be his security force, those who guarded him.
One step forward.
And will stay with him until he is buried.
Right and left face. Ho. Color guard. Hold color. Color guard. One step back. Ho. And salute. Ho. Color guard. Right and left face. Ho. Color guard. Dismiss.
As Ron said earlier, this service will begin with an organ prelude, and then we will hear first from the Reverend Kenneth B. Smith of the Chicago Theological Seminary, followed by the woman whose church this is, Dr. Johnny Coleman of Christ Universal Temple.
The service is underway.
Eternal God is thy refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms. God is our refuge and strength, very present help in trouble. Souls of the righteous are in the hand of God. They are in peace. Their hope is full of immortality. God proved them, found them worthy for himself. God shall give his angels charge over thee to keep thee in all thy ways. God will never leave thee nor forsake thee. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in, from this time forth and even forevermore. Rest eternal give to them, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon them. I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away.
Blessed be the name of the Lord. The eternal God is thy refuge, and underneath are God's everlasting arms. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. We could just move it a little closer on the front pew here so we can seat some more. Be seated. Congregation, with the exception of the family, to kindly stand for the call to worship led by the Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman, minister of Christ Universal Temple, followed by the Christ Universal Temple Ensemble and congregation singing together, Lift Every Voice and Sing. Then the ensemble will sing Hallelujah, after which we will begin to hear the tributes.
May we become still. Lord, you made Harold Washington an instrument of thy peace. Where there was hatred, he brought love. Where there was injury, he brought pardon. Where there was doubt, he brought faith. Where there was despair, hope. Where there was darkness, light. Where there was sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that we may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we shall receive. And it is in dying that Mayor Harold Washington is born in eternal life. You may be seated.
We stand for the singing of Lift Up Your Voice and Sing, please.
Every voice and sing,
first tribute will be from Mr. Raymond Price, brother of Harold Washington. His tribute will be followed by the Honorable James R. Thompson, Governor of the State of Illinois, the Honorable George Dunn, President of the Cook County Board of Commissioners, and the Reverend Jesse L. Jackson, founder of Operation PUSH and President of the Rainbow Coalition. The family expresses deep appreciation to all of those giving tributes for keeping their remarks within the allotted time span.
Tribute to a fallen tree. In the giant forests of the world, trees live for decades and sometimes even more than a century. During the course of their lives, they give of themselves in a variety of ways, as shelters for weary travelers, as havens for the birds of the air and the beasts of the field, as bulwarks against the storms of life, as symbols of courage and strength for all to behold, as enduring signs of quiet dignity, warmth, and majestic beauty. When the tree falls, when the last pulse of life seeps from its bark and trunk, the tree dies. However, this is but the beginning of its life eternal. It lives in the spaces occupied by the birds that sing and soar to the heavens, birds which once nestled in the warmth of the tree's branches, and they remember. It lives in the lives of the beasts and insects which found homes in the tree's bosom, and they too remember. It lives on in our blessed memories of its greatness, its majesty, its power and humility. It lives on in all the noble thoughts and deeds of love, justice, freedom, liberation, and courage which inspires us. And so it is with Harold. He shall live on as you and I continue to reach for the heavens and reach deep into the soul of all humanity. He shall live on as men, women, and children step forward to claim the promise which God intends for all of us. For all of us to be free and seek justice, to share in the task of liberating others, to be compassionate as we bind up the broken-hearted, to love and make peace in a world so often filled with hate and violence. And so it is that we must live our lives as members as members of the whole human family. Proud, undaunted, and humble. And they too shall remember.
Broken by it, I too may be. Bow to it, I never will. The probability that we may fall in the struggle ought not to deter us from the support of a cause we believe to be just. It shall not deter me. So spoke young Abraham Lincoln in Springfield in December in 1839. So spoke Bishop Matthew Simpson at Oak Ridge Cemetery in delivering the funeral eulogy of Abraham Lincoln in 18 1965. So lived Harold Washington every day of his life as the mayor of this great city. Broken by it I too may be, bow to it I never will. The probability that we may fall in the struggle ought not to deter us from the support of a cause we believe to be just. It shall not deter me, and it did not. Harold Washington, accessible to people. Stop on a street corner, pause in the day or the night. A word, a laugh, a tear, a pat on the back, a grin, a hug, encouragement. He gave new meaning to rhetoric. When you were denounced by Harold, you were denounced. When some sullen plot needed to be exposed, it was exposed. When the crusade had to be gathered and led, it was gathered and led. He understood his own foibles and the foibles of others. He could laugh in private company about politicians. He was stubborn. Negotiating with Harold Washington was like dripping water on granite, drop by drop. He was charming. He could charm your socks off. He was passionate in a cause. He taught us all that there still are some politicians who can feel passion for a cause. He knew the joy of politics as well as the tragedy and the hard work. He was a prodigious campaigner, ferocious in political combat. But most importantly, determined that his elections would mean something for people and for this great city. And on Wednesday last, in the afternoon, he greeted God with that grin. Hey, God, how's Harold?
Members of the clergy, the rabbiniate, members of the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of government, Mary Smith and the mayor's brother, family, and friends of Harold Washington. Carl Sandburg once said that life is like an onion. Peels off one layer at a time. And quite frequently it causes us to cry. Government in a democracy is our most priceless impersonal possession. And politics in a democracy is the vehicle of government. And Harold Washington understood that very, very well. About 10 days ago, at a meeting of the Cook County Democratic Central Committee, Harold Washington appeared, and it was the first time in my recollection that he ever attended such a meeting. And he was exuberant. As we know, his immense vocabulary, and his great sense of humor, and how he could become jocular in such a humorous way. And certainly on this occasion, he was really inspired. He complimented the Central Committee for what they had accomplished in framing a ticket for the next election. And yes, he was the inspirator of that ticket. And he said that the past was gone, and he was pricking the noses of some of the people that he had problems with, if we can say, Governor, in the past. And he said all of that was gone, and that we now had a new page. And he talked about the necessity for unity, not only in the political discipline, but also in society. And he touched upon the necessity for that all of us should live together and work together for the best interests of our community, the city. You know, when we reflect upon it, we receive a message. This was his message to us, to remain together and to work together for the best interests of all of society. And if our presence here today manifests our sincere respect for him, we shall take that message from here and live it as he had requested. Farewell, my friend. God speed you on your way. And as the night follows the day, we shall all follow you.
Reverend Coleman. Reverend Coleman, clergy, elected officials, friends. This year our community has been blessed and challenged, rewarded with a tremendous re-election victory of Harold Washington. Our spirits soared, but then the death angel began to ride. Bill Berry, Dan Branch, Harold Washington. Death is never sudden, it is certain. We live our lives as if life is certain and death is uncertain. Death is certain, life is uncertain. Live it fully, wholly, meaningfully. It's a fleeting gift, not yours to choose, only to use or to lose. Thanksgiving Eve, Jack and I were in Kuwait, bound for Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Ethiopia, and we got the news. The death angel can change agendas and priorities. It can alter our values and make the very important irrelevant in the twinkling of an eye. We came home immediately. Today we weep, but we must think through our tears. Harold is dead. We observe his remains. We rejoice in his spirit. It's all in this room. God's decision is irrevocable, irreversible, unmistakable, and final. How could he take Harold, we ask? We're hurt. We need him so much. Now more than ever before, it seems. He took our Harold at 65.
He took his own son, Jesus, at 33. He gave Harold 32 years longer than Jesus and 27 years longer than Dr. King and Malcolm X. We who live must keep the team together. Harold's latest slate is a monument to his vision of the city and urban America. He didn't leave us comfortless. He left us with 5 pillars that will be challenged. There'll be those putting dynamite sticks around those pillars, lest we protect. The Bible says, remove not the ancient landmarks which our fathers and mothers have set. The guideline, power with integrity and vision. The first pillar, after 4 years, 26 older people. A lawsuit, a victory, a special election, a special kind of 26. That's Harold's legacy. 26 that could vote and win any victory, a legacy. The ability to gain support of the public at large, a special kind of pillar. The ability to face the press and prevail, a special kind of pillar. And to reach beyond ethnicity and make all of Chicago one. 5 pillars that must not crumble. When great teams are down, they rally. We cannot surrender to darkness, to polarization and pain and division. If we did, our enemies would rejoice. Our sadness must not be the occasion of their celebration. We are healed by our stripes and made stronger by our suffering. Through our faith, we have learned to master pain. We've lost a friend, a brother, a leader, from precinct to Pretoria, Pilsen to Poland, from Robert Taylor to Soweto. Our faith is being tested. We've lost Harold. We've not lost our faith. We will not surrender. Harold won against the odds. He died with an enlarged heart, but not a broken heart. It was enlarged by 3 because he had to have a big heart to make room for all of Chicago. He had to have a heart triple the size of a normal man, snatch down barriers, make this our kind of town. We thank God for Harold Washington. His heart was not broken because he put the pieces together. Those 26 pieces must stay together. His heart, though enlarged, must never be broken. Last Thanksgiving Day, Harold had dinner with Jack and I at home. We'll miss you, buddy. The children at the Bud Billiken parade. Bud Billiken became the dreams and imagination. You became the reality. The myth of you became an exuberant man, life and liberty. We'll miss you, buddy. No more early morning talks. No more 0067. No more tape messages. No more jokes about baggy britches. You fought the good fight, Harold. You showed them big wards, big city, big mayor. You ran a good race. The strongest last leg we've ever seen. Thank you very much. I'll see you in the morning, buddy. We will not let you down. We will not let you down. We will not let you down.
We will continue our service of worship and celebration as we are led by the Chicago Housing Authority Ambassadors Choir, which will sing Keep On Moving, followed by tributes from the Reverend William Gray, Congressman of the 1st Congressional District of Philadelphia, representing the National Black Congressional Caucus, then a tribute by Mr. Ernest Bearfield, Chief of Staff, followed by Alderman Timothy Evans of the 4th Ward, and Alderman Jesus Garcia of the 22nd Ward.
Remember that this race is not given to the swift nor strong. It's given to those that endure it to the end. So keep on. Don't look left, don't look right. Oh, keep moving. Run with patience. Keep moving. The road is rough and the going gets tough and it feels like you've had enough. Crowd of life is a witness to trial, so don't you? Though the race may seem long, oh, keep moving. Yeah. Remember that this race is not given to the swift nor strong. It's given to those that endure it to the end. So keep on. Don't look left, don't look right. Yeah, keep moving. Run with patience. Yeah, keep moving. The road is rough and the going gets tough and it feels like you've had enough. Crowd of life is a witness to trial, so don't you? Yeah. You gotta keep on moving. Keep on running. Running. You gotta keep on moving. And you gotta keep on running. Keep on striving. Keep on moving on. You gotta keep on. You gotta keep on running. You gotta keep on striving. Yeah, on moving on. Don't give up. Don't give in. You can win if you quit. Hold on. Hold on. Through sickness and pain. Through hard times and good times. You got to hold on. Keep on moving. Keep on moving. And you gotta keep on running. You gotta keep on striving. Yeah, keep on, keep on, keep on, keep on moving. Yeah, yeah. You gotta keep on moving. You got to keep on moving. Hallelujah. You gotta keep on moving. Oh. Hallelujah. 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 Keep on moving. Whoa.
There is a story told about a man who was given a magnificent gift of a beautiful watch that was magnificent in not only that it told time, but it carried the day, the month. It could be used as a stopwatch. It could even be used to measure distance. He loved it dearly, but then one day it broke. And he went to get it fixed. And he went to several places and none could repair it until finally one jeweler said, "Sir, you will have to return it to the sender." We come today, members of the Congressional Black Caucus, because our colleague, Harold Washington, a beautiful gift that was shared with this city, this nation, and with us in the Congress, has been returned to the sender. For it is he that hath made us, and not we ourselves. We come, the 23 members of the Congressional Black Caucus, grieving with you in this city, for indeed Harold Washington was a gift that we shared as well. From 1980 to 1983, he served with distinction in the Congress, on the Education and Labor Committee, and also on the Judiciary Committee. And it was there that he distinguished himself, working with Congressman John Conyers in ensuring the passage of a strong Voting Rights Act extension and making it possible for the continued enfranchisement of millions of Americans and fighting those forces that wanted to water it down. He was a leader in the Congress, and he made us all proud when he became the mayor of this great city against all odds. For you see, he symbolized a major leap forward in political empowerment for the disinherited and the disadvantaged and for Black America. He reminded us in the Black Caucus and in America indeed that through determination, courage, excellence, and faith that we can climb every mountain and ford every stream. In the House of Representatives, when Congress closes a session, we close it with the words of adjournment sine die, which literally means without death, without finality. But in the words of the parliamentarian, it means that we are adjourning to a date not certain. Harold, your colleagues come today knowing that one day all of us will be called from labor to reward. And until that date, which none of us know, we simply say, goodbye, so long, you made us proud, and sine die.
Well, Mayor,
we're all here now. We're all here to say our last farewell and to rejoice in your life. Mayor, you can build great cathedrals, large or small. You can build skyscrapers, grand or tall. You can conquer all the legends of the past, but only what you do for Christ will last. And Mayor, I know that you've always sought to do what was Christ-like and lasting for Chicago, its people, and its youth. Mayor, you opened your arms and let us all in to touch you at the very core of your heart, always thinking of the people, their opportunities, their fulfillments first, and yourself last. You legitimated the people's struggle, took a movement and recreated it in government as you reshaped Chicago's institutions to make possible their fulfillment, the fulfillment of the people's dreams. You legitimated open, fair, and democratic decision-making, which let the people participate. You challenged the presumptions of race and provided a broad bridge of your spirit, your politics, your administration, and your personality, across which a whole community, a city of diverse people, of ethnic, national, racial origins, and gender, walked across to become one city. You took the long view and built a sound future for Chicago and its people, whether in finance, development, or social relations. As you visited all corners of this city, both strongholds of support and concentrations of opposition, you helped all of us learn how to disagree without hatred, how to compromise with dignity, and how to recognize that our collective futures are truly tied together as one city and as one people. You were a symbol of success for those who had lost faith in the political process, for those who had lost hope in the future, and for those who had lost belief in their own dignity. But perhaps most important, for the ordinary citizens, for the people who are outside screaming to come in, for the people who are really Chicago, you were just Harold, a mayor who was truly of the people, a mayor who was touched, and who was touched by the people you served, a mayor who reached out to everyone in a personal way, with your smile, with your humor, and with your enthusiasm. You made us all feel a part of what was going on in the city, and you made us proud and comfortable in calling you not Mayor Washington, but simply Harold. You were more than mayor of Chicago. You were a friend to us all, its people, my chief executive and my friend. But even more importantly, you have been mayor for us all. And even in your death, you remain our vision for the future. We will all miss you, Mayor. But like all great men, your legacy will live beyond your presence. Mayor, we believe, all of us, that you've done this work with us for Christ, and that it will last. Goodbye, dear friend. We loved you much, but God loved you more.
Chicago weeps today. I guess it's appropriate that it rain outside, just as it's raining inside here. Now, we weep today because this city has lost a native son, one who grew up here on these streets, one who was educated here in these public schools, one who succeeded here, right here, as we watched him overcome great odds. He gave us a lifetime of service, even when we didn't have sense enough to ask for it. He was that kind of man. College level, law school, as a lawyer, a state representative, state senator, congressman, mayor, but not only that, a national leader for the urban agenda. And that day, no matter what, will never be turned back the way it used to be. He was our beacon of hope. Through his eyes, we could see. It's like a star that was permitted to shine very, very bright. And I guess as I look at that flag in front of us, the one on my left and your right, the one with 4 stars, I will never look at that flag again without seeing in my mind's eye a 5th star that will shine forever. At this point, I guess our brightest hope has to be what is left. And what is left is the legacy of his dream. You know it. Good housing, economic parity, fairness, equity, all of those things that make life worth living. He succeeded with that. Promises made, promises kept. He did his job well. We are now summoned, and I hope that we are up to the task. Let his legacy be our finest hour. Let us do what he would do. Let us push this city forward once again. Sleep, my friend. Farewell, my friend. You have earned the right to spend an eternity with the Prince of Peace, Lord of Lords, and the Lord of Hosts. Thank you very, very much.
Remembering our brother, the late Rudy Lozano, may he rest in peace, I would like to share with you a few words. With words of children and in the spirit of little giants all over the city, I pay tribute to Harold. Adios, querido amigo. Goodbye, dear friend. You came to our community to help build the spirit of unity, The seeds that we then sowed became the fruit that victory bestowed. You walked through our barrios, our neighborhoods, and touched our hearts. We worked together to make our lives better. Your work in Congress paved the way for progress. When others didn't care, you dared. To gain what was essential, you cultivated our potential. You made us see in 1983. We gained some more in 1984. We came alive in 1985. And with you, in 86, we became 26. To learn what makes us go, there's no place you wouldn't go. From the beaches of San Juan to the mountains of Mexico. And now that you've gone, we the people vow to stay strong. The unity of our coalition is a tribute to the Washington tradition. Today in 87, we know that you're in heaven. Adios, amigo, adios.
We will now be led by the Rockefeller Memorial Chapel Choir at the University of Chicago, which will sing the Battle Hymn of the Republic, after which we will hear the readings from the Scripture by Rabbi Lawrence H. Charney, immediate past president of the Chicago Board of Rabbis, and His Eminence Joseph Cardinal Bernardin, Archbishop of Chicago. Accompanying the Cardinal is Bishop Wilton Gregory, Auxiliary Bishop of Chicago. And after the reading of the Scriptures, the Reverend Dr. W. Sterling Carey, Chairperson of the Council of Religious Leaders of Metropolitan Chicago, will offer the prayer.
This reading from Scripture is from the book of Joshua, chapter 19, verses 49 and 50. When they had finished allotting the land by its boundaries, the Israelites gave a portion in their midst to Joshua, son of Nun. At the command of the Lord, they gave him the town that he asked for, Timnath-Serach in the hill country of Ephraim. He fortified the town and settled in it. Chapter 24, verses 7 through 15. Then you, the children of Israel, cried out to the Lord, and he put darkness between you and the Egyptians. Then he brought the sea upon them, and it covered them. Your own eyes saw what I did to the Egyptians. After you had lived a long time in the wilderness, I brought you to the land of the Amorites, who lived beyond the Jordan. They gave battle to you, but I delivered them into your hands. I annihilated them for you, and you took possession of their land. Thereupon Balak, son of Zippor, the king of Moab, made ready to attack Israel. He sent for Bilam, son of Beor, to curse you. But I refused to listen to Bilam. He had to bless you, and thus I saved you from him. Then you crossed the Jordan, and you came to Jericho. The citizens of Jericho and the Amorites, Perizzites, Canaanites, Hittites, Girgashites, Hivites, and Jebusites fought you, but I delivered them from your hands. I sent a plague ahead of you, and it drove them out before you. Just like the two Amorite kings, not by your sword or by your bow. I have given you a land for which you did not labor, and towns which you did not build, and you have settled in them. You are enjoying vineyards and olive groves, which you did not plant. Now, therefore, revere the Lord and serve him with undivided loyalty. Put away the gods that your forefathers served beyond the Euphrates and Egyptian, and serve the Lord. Or if you are loath to serve the Lord, choose this day which ones you're going to serve. The gods that your forefathers served beyond the Euphrates, or those of the Amorites in whose land you are settled? But I and my household will serve the Lord. Amen.
This reading is taken from the first letter of Paul to the Corinthians, chapter 13, verses 1 to 13. Now I will show you the way which surpasses all the others. If I speak with human tongues and angelic as well, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong, a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy, and with full knowledge comprehend all mysteries, if I have faith great enough to move mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give everything I have to feed the poor, and hand over my body to be burned, but have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not jealous. It does not put on airs. It is not snobbish. Love is never rude. It is not self-seeking. It is not prone to anger. neither does it brood over injuries. Love does not rejoice in what is wrong, but rejoices with the truth. There is no limit to love's forbearance, to its trust, its hope, its power to endure. Love never fails. Prophecies will cease, tongues will be silent, knowledge will pass away. Our knowledge is imperfect and our prophesying is imperfect. When the perfect comes, the imperfect will pass away. When I was a child, I used to talk like a child, think like a child, reason like a child. When I became a man, I put childish ways aside. Now we see indistinctly as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. My knowledge is imperfect now. Then I shall know even as I am known. There are in the end three things that last: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love.
Let us pray. Almighty and everlasting God, you give birth to human existence. Your love embraces the saints in their walk through the valley of the shadow of death. We give thee thanks for thy servant Harold, for his steadfast faith in thee, his love and compassion for global humankind. God of grace, thou didst use thy servant Harold as a redemptive instrument in the political life of the city of Chicago. Continue through us the redemptive work begun in Harold. Strengthen our participation in the struggle to resist the politics of division. Continue through us Harold's struggle to reconcile diverse races and ethnic groups into one people. Unite us in a common effort to make Chicago a city where all have access to decent housing, quality education, meaningful employment, security, and fullness of life. We rejoice in the certainty of faith, the assurance that freed from the struggles of this life, thy servant Harold now dwells secure in that city not made with hands. Blessed be thy name, world without end. Amen.
And now let us hear the Apostolic Church of God Sanctuary Choir, which will sing "Carry Me Home," followed by the preaching of the Word, the Bread of Life, as presented by the Reverend D. Herbert Martin, pastor of the Progressive Community Church.
carry me on home. One day I'll sit down by the shore. I've got a better place. You've got a better place where all your joy will have no end. After I've done my best, I've got to go on home and take my rest. And the Lord will carry. He's gonna take me home. One day I'll sit by the shore. I've got a better place. You've got a better place where all your joy. After I've done my best, I've got to go on home and take my rest. Then the Lord will. Me home, me home, me home, me home. Come on, let's go home. Let's go home. After I've done everything I can, I need. Carry me home, carry me home, carry me home, Come on, 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 come on. After I've done everything I can, I need. Come on, come on. Come on, come on. Yeah, come on. Come on, come on. Carry me on the whole.
Let the church say amen. Thank you. This place is jumping. Amen. Lives of great men all remind us that we can make our lives sublime and on departing leave behind us footprints on the sands of time, footprints that perhaps another sailing o'er life's solemn main, a shipwrecked and forlorn brother, our sister, seeing, will take heart again. To the family of Harold Washington, Roy, Edward, Elizabeth, Ernest, Raymond, Ernestine, Gwen, Elaine, and Patricia, all of the relatives stood around him and supported him throughout his life. To Mariella, loving friend and beautiful spirit. To the leaders of the religious community, may I express my appreciation personally to you for your expressions of comfort and support to the family in this time of sincere need. And I especially am grateful to each of you for your words of encouragement to the little church located at 56 East 48th Street down in the old hood. Thank you. To the leaders of government, locally, nationally, and globally, business, civic, labor, community, grassroots, friends, enemies, ladies and gentlemen. God has acted, and he has placed us between two seasons, season of Thanksgiving and the season of Advent, season of gratitude, and the season of great expectancy. I like that. I've had difficult times trying to put together this eulogy. Normally, it is not my style to write sermons and eulogies down. I'm a little bit freer. But having gone through seminary, I have tried hard to exercise that theological discipline and write something down here for the sake of history for Harold. In times like these, we need a savior. We need one another. And I personally want to thank the mayor's team for the dignified way in which you have dealt with the difficulties of these recent days. God bless you. By allowing the political discussions that are inevitable to remain submerged as possible unto the family and the city and its co-workers in Christ, all of us have had an opportunity to properly mourn and say our fond farewells to His Honor, Mayor Harold Washington. Thank you for your restraint. God guide you in the days ahead. And continue in this spirit, that you do not send unclear signals to the people. I would like to express appreciation, especially to Reverend Coleman, for opening up her place of worship to receive us in this place. The Progressive Community Church thanks you for your spirit of cooperation. Amen. I want to thank Reverend Jesse L. Jackson for coming back home, for not allowing other items on the agenda to take precedence over feeling a part of the pain of this family here in Chicago. And we pray for the days ahead that we move as a family together, dealing with difficult times. Mayor Washington was not just a good mayor. He was great. He was faithful. He wasn't just a politician. He was a statesman. And like most of you who are gathered here, there are some very special thoughts that I have in my heart and mind about Harold Washington. Many of you have been hugged by him and kissed by him and encouraged by him, inspired by him. Some of you have said, I'll never wash his hand that he touched. He's touched us. And as his pastor, I feel a tremendous loss. He was my personal friend. I am his pastor. He is my mayor. And he lately became our frat brother in Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. So many good thoughts that are in my memory lock. And as every pastor knows, there are some thoughts that must even go to the grave with us. Beyond these very personal thoughts, though, there are so many others that I would like to share with you. And I beg your indulgence to listen to me. Harold Washington is the compendium of all our historical struggle as black people in America. He is the epitome of all of our present achievements and a symbol of all of our future aspirations and yearnings and promise. Our loss is great and our grief is real. In a very real sense, he is the embodiment of our last 33 years of civil rights gains and progress in America. Caught up in his personage is a vignette ranging from Dred Scott decision of 1857 to Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954, to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the Fair Housing Amendment of 1968, and all of the subsequent
legislation for the enfranchisement of poor and oppressed people in America. In January of 1987, another star was placed in his crown for his untiring labor to have a day set aside for the celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday as a national holiday. Harold Washington made good use of the time that God gave him on this earth. It is not how long one lives, but how well one lives. Harold lived his life well. He loved life, and he lived it to the full. Every moment counted for something good and noble for somebody else, giving his all to life and taking very little for himself. He loved people in general, black, white, red, yellow, brown, green, no matter who you were. He loved children, especially the little shy children. Always good to watch him with children. Tell you, if you really want to tell what a character's made of, watch how they treat children. And he made a special place for children on his reform agenda. And I pray to God that it won't fall through the cracks. He had a great love and concern for senior citizens, asked Hortensia Randolph. And he gave them their respect and was oftentimes even reprimanded by a senior mother. Boy, why don't you sit down and get some rest? He showed compassion for those with special needs, the handicapped, and others with disabling conditions. He made things happen in this town. Streets. When was it the last time we've been so inconvenienced trying to get to and fro around in the ghetto? Not until Harold Washington began to make things happen for us. And a host of economic development projects and initiatives are there to testify to his commitment, to his loyalty, to making those who have been cut out and left out included and made to feel a part. And sometimes I wonder what the press would do for news if it wasn't for Harold Washington making things happen in Chicago. Not only things like that, he never forgot people. I have a case in point. I never forget his love and concern for a woman by the name of Lois Edwards, his father's secretary. Later became his own secretary. And in the sunset of her years, he rose to great power and height in Chicago. But he never forgot Lois. He committed her to the care of the church. But Harold had a way, a great capacity to remember the little people. Those who were left out, the helpless, the overlooked, Harold Washington remembered. I'll tell you something else about him. Harold was full of fun. You know, he had a playful humor about himself. And there was nothing more pleasant than seeing that award-winning smile flash across his face. To hear him burst forth in laughter. He could also cut a real bad step on the dance floor. For reference on his two-step, I think you better see Mary Ella, if not Gladys Knight at the New Rego. He had an odd singing voice, and he would sing loud his favorite songs and hymns and ballads, and can't you just hear him singing on last election night that song, Chicago? Harold also had a toughness about himself. He was tough. Some folks will even say he's kind of mean. For a reference on his toughness, call E.V., E.K., and E.V. And they'll tell you he's nobody's pushover. Sometimes Harold would make you think that he was as mean as a junkyard dog. But beneath all that toughness, toughness born out of his experience as a black man dealing in tough times, dealing with the tough people, dealing with tough issues of life. Beneath all of that toughness was a real Harold, a compassionate, seriously committed human being, warm and gracious and willing to share his all. Harold was a no-nonsense person. He didn't have time for foolishness. He didn't have time for inefficiency, and he could not tolerate at all ineptness. He had very little time for ceremony. And I just wonder what he would have to say about all of this fuss that we are keeping up over him today. He dealt primarily with the substantive issues of life, those that went to the heart, to the core of cause. He had the best grasp on the principles of cause and effect that I have ever witnessed. A tremendous analytical mind, a mind that was almost like an iron cage. He had very little use for, quote, the finer things of life. Personal material wealth was not a primary focus for his life. Things were not important, but people were vital. He paid little attention to dress codes, to social etiquette, and other social niceties. His emphasis was always on the principles of human relations and ethical dynamics that govern those relationships. He was concerned about substance, not style and fashion. Those dynamics of human encounter that make human character whole and complete, these were his riches. The finer principles and values of life, the love for justice and fairness and opportunities for those who are powerless, and advocacy for those who are poor and weak among us, and for those whose backs were pressed against the walls. Harold always had a word of hope. Harold was loyal to his friends, even if such loyalty threatened his own well-being. He would not forsake a friend. He kept his word. He maintained his integrity. Harold Washington had a tremendous intellectual capacity that was also accompanied by a prolific vocabulary with which to express himself. He could speak the King's English par excellence. So sufficient was he in his articulation, all of us, including his constant friends in the media, had to refer often to our thesaurus or our dictionaries to find out whether we had been complimented, informed, or insulted by his statements. He also had a working knowledge. Not only could he speak the King's English, but he had a working knowledge of the 47th Street black dialect. Oh, yes, he could. Harold could fuss and cuss black folk style. He knew every idiomatic expression and could readily communicate his feelings at that level as well. He knew how to talk with black people. He knew how to talk to black people. He knew how to talk about black people. And baby, you better believe me, he knew how to talk for black people. He never left home. Harold never left us. He stayed one with us. He never left home. He never left his real base of support. Harold never abandoned us. And we all knew that Harold, no matter how long he stayed away, would come home. He loved the Third Ward, the place of his childhood, his young adult years, and his fruitful adult life. He was deeply spiritual, not religious. A lot of religious folks are going straight to hell. He was deeply spiritual, not sanctimonious, but deeply spiritual. I have been Harold Washington's pastor since 1976. He's been a member of Progressive since 1982. Harold joined Progressive April 25th, 1982. His favorite passage of scripture was Psalms 27, verses 1 to 3. The Lord is my light and my salvation. His favorite song, if I can help somebody, And he used to sing lusty and loud, even above some of those bad singing deacons of mine. If Jesus goes with me, I'll go anywhere. He tried hard to make church at least once a month on Communion Sunday. When he didn't make it, I found my way to his apartment and we had communion. We prayed together at least twice a week. He would always visit other churches, storefronts, and cathedrals. No denomination of faith was off limits. He had an ecumenical spirit. No congregation was too small. No pastor unimportant. Harold knew the vital importance and the role of the black church and its clergy in the liberation struggle and the significance to the life of the movement, which is something many of the nouveau arrivés in the political arena must learn. He would even go to churches where he was not welcome. Harold tried to heal wounds and to bridge the gap that separated Chicago, to heal the wounds of racial and ethnic groups. Now, I never will forget the stand that he took to keep the storefront churches open. And there was wisdom and understanding in that action. Harold gave his time, his talent, and his money to his church. He understood that the church is the only indigenous viable institution in the black community and thus needed his loyal support. He surrounded himself early in 1982 and 83 with religious leadership. His campaign was blessed with the prayers of the righteous. His candidacy was anointed for victory by the priests and prophets of the Most High God. And his ascendancy to the 5th floor of City Hall as Chicago's first black mayor is testimony to the power of God working in the affairs of human events. His spirituality was expressed in a living commitment to practice his faith each day by working to right wrongdoing. He understands that the evil of institutional racism and anti-Semitism with their demonic and deadly chokehold on the lives of the poor, the powerless, the disinherited must be broken. Policies and systems that were non-responsive and insensitive to human need, he knew it had to be changed. And where there were no policies and no systems to guarantee the delivery of services to people, he worked diligently to shape and form such policies locally, statewide, and nationally. To these ends, Harold Washington dedicated himself. His commitment to a reform program. To this end, he gave his very life. And the Progressive Community Church family and all of us will greatly miss him. Now, there is little that we can say or do to add or detract from Harold's record of service. For he alone has so nobly lived, served, and died that it behooves us even to know that we have stood shoulder to shoulder with such a giant. We have met in this place to affirm his goodness, to thank God for sending him our way, and to commit ourselves to the unfinished agenda of liberation, empowerment, and self-determination, and to keeping the movement for freedom and justice strong and alive. Harold Washington has done all that he can do to help us. He kept the store well. He cleaned out the thieves and circumvented the robbers. And he's left the door of opportunity wide open. And it is up to us to help ourselves and to help others. By his sudden death, we have sustained a great wound. We're bleeding. Our ship is in troubled waters. The sharks have gotten scent of our blood. They are after us. We cannot afford to thrash about in the water. We must swim or perish. No time for power brokering, no time for king-making, no time for ego trips, no time for self-serving agendas or hungry power grabs. We must work together in unity of mind and singleness of purpose to keep the spirit of reform alive. My brothers and sisters, the stakes are too high. The cause for which we struggle is much larger than any one man or woman or any one group or organization. Too much sacrifice has been made. Too much blood and sweat and tears have been shed. We cannot stop now. In the words of the old civil rights song, ain't gonna let nobody turn us round. We gonna keep on walking. We gonna keep on talking, marching on the freedom's land. And I have come by here. I have come by here this morning out of the bowels of the black ghetto, out of the bowels of the black church, to say to you this morning, in the words of Psalm 127, verse 1, except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. Brothers and sisters, we must pray for God's guidance and for enlightenment for the challenges before us. For no matter how much smooth political conversation we conduct behind the closed doors in smoke-filled rooms, unless the Lord is invited into our deliberations, unless the spirit of love informs our thoughts, all of our plans are in vain. All of our strategies are like ships without a sail in the midst of a storm-tossed sea. We would be no better than the men and women stumbling around over each other in darkness. No matter how well trained our staffs are, and no matter how sophisticated our department heads are, how well trained our police and militia are, except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. We've come a mighty long way, been by the love and the grace of a good God. Lest we forget, only God will take us through. The God of history, the God who acts through the affairs of men and women, the God who acts in nations, in government, and yes, even through death and tragedy. The God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, the God of Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, Malcolm, Martin. That God, the I am that I am God, the beginning and the end God, the Alpha and the Omega. That God. Oh, we don't come by here to mourn. We don't come by here to weep. We come by here to say, let Mount Zion rejoice. And let the daughters of Judah be glad, for this God is our God. He is with us, Emmanuel. Even so, Lord Jesus, come. The road to the future appears to be a rocket road, filled with uncertainties, doubts, and anxieties about our common life together as a city, as a nation, as a global community. The incidence of racism, anti-Semitism is on the rise. Unemployment, the breakdown of family life, a troubled public educational system, a poorly managed public housing authority, the plight of the homeless, health care, crisis for the indigent, and the list goes on and on. But then all of this is exacerbated by the growing tension in our global order, our nation's involvement in South Africa, in South America, in the Persian Gulf, and other issues of the Middle East, our struggle to end the buildup of nuclear arms and the global struggle for a lasting world peace among the nations of the earth. And then, if this was not enough, impacting upon these are the frightful realities we face today of a national crisis in our national leadership. Confidence in national leadership is at an all-time low. As we watch the developing presidential campaign, the issues that should dominate the discussion for this high elected office are dimmed and clouded by selfishness and greed and lasciviousness and false pride and licentiousness. And for us today, the loss of a giant like Harold Washington, only God can help us through this. Now let me just try to get through this rest of this as quickly as possible. For many people, both black and white, these frightening signs of our time sends them into states of paralyzing depression, pessimism, resignation, and despair. But for those of us who are of a reformed mind, those of us who dare to risk ourselves for the future hope of our succeeding generations, those of us who, like our foremothers and forefathers, who in spite of their troubled times found hope in the worst of times and out of their meager resources passed on to us a legacy of freedom. I say to you, that those of us who dare to be bold enough in our faith in the future, that the darkness of this present hour, the difficulties of this present time are only opportunities for us to strike a blow for freedom, self-determination, and justice for all. This moment has magic in it. Hear me now. This moment has magic in it. For here, Harold Washington, even in death, has called us to our final summit meeting in this place. He has provided us with great opportunity through his record of service. Opportunity to defend ourselves from the evil that nourishes injustice and the indifference that tolerates hatred, racial bitterness, and the inability to live beyond class and color. Opportunity to teach, to nurture, encourage our children to fulfill all their potential and their promise by showing them by precept and example through the provision of ample resources in educational and recreational facilities and opportunities. We have a good opportunity this morning as a religious community by moving our local churches, our temples, our synagogues to be a living part of God's universal purpose, realizing that from one blood God created all nations to dwell upon the face of this good earth and to prosper and live abundantly in it. We have a golden opportunity to keep our country safe from the ravages of war and the practice of war by electing national leaders equipped with vision, keen insight, sound judgment as they work for the peace and justice for all humankind and deliver us from the practice of oppression, from the conspiracy of power and the power of violence, so that government of the people, for the people, and by the people should not perish from the earth. So let us seize this magic moment as our final salute to our chief, to rededicate ourselves to the task of a strong and aggressive reform in the city of Chicago. Beloved, let us continue in well-doing. Don't get weary, for there's still a great camp meeting in the promised land. Let us pray together. Let us work together. Let us work until that old statue standing out there in New York Harbor will in spirit turn around from Europe and say to South Africa, say to Haiti, and say to Henry Horner, Robert Taylor, give me your tired, give me your poor and your huddle masters yearning to be free. Let us work together. Weep not. Weep not. Harold Washington is not dead. He lives on beyond the grave. Death does not have the victory. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, for as in Adam all die, even so in Christ shall all be made alive. We do not affirm death, but life, life after life. For Jesus has already said, I am the resurrection. I am the life. Though you die, yet shall you live. And if you live and believe in me, you shall never die. Behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye,